This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Shalom Aleichem. Baruchim Abam. We're continuing in Mishnah Berura, Siman Kuf Lamed Zayin. We're middle of Siv Dalid. We're up to Mishnah Berura, Siv Kata and Yud Gimel. Let's read the Mechaber again. Imkara echad shnei psukim tzarich lachser v'likos. If you called up two psukim for one oila, you have to read again. V'imloi karo bein shoshin ela tisha psukim. If you only called up a total of 9 among the 3, shloisha l'chol echad einam tzrichim lachser v'likos. You don't have to go back. V'raya l'davar parshas Amalek. Avalam kare pachas mitisha. If you read less than 9 psukim tzrichim lachser v'likos. So today we're going to try to learn Mishnah Berura Siv Kata and Yud Gimel. Tzarich lachser v'likos. You have to go back and read again. What that means is the oila who read 2 psukim has to go back and read again. Rav Moshe in our Chaim Chilek Aleph Sif Lamed Hey, the Dirshu brings, says it's better in such a scenario to call up somebody else to get an Aliya. Why? Because we're not bekiyin in Chalukas HaPsukim, and it could be the first one did have 3 psukim, and therefore lechatchila ein oila adam echad shnei pamim. Chachi, you should not call up 2 people. You should not call one person twice. And even if the second oila was a Levi, let's say if the oila who called up 2 psukim was a Levi, and if you're going to call up Yisrael for Shlishi, maybe you're causing the Levi to have missed out, it's not a problem. Because it's not fundamental that you have to call up a Levi. So in other words, Rav Moshe is bringing in a very interesting factor. Okay, the factor is you think you only read 2 psukim, you don't know that for sure. It could be you really read 3 psukim. Now this l'chayra is anywhere in the Torah, even in Bereshis or in Devarim. That's the way the Dirshu quotes it. That this possibility is that Rav Moshe brings is in Archaim Chelek Aleph Siman Lamed Hey. There's another tshuva in Rav Moshe. Rav Moshe says specifically the second half of Vayikra is probable that we do not have the correct number of psukim. We don't have the correct breakup of psukim. Be it as it may, according to Rav Moshe, anytime you call up someone and you only read 2 psukim, you'll do it again. However, you're not going to call up the same person. It seems, though, that this concern is more prevalent in the latter half of Vayikra, and in that case, we have to see maybe you don't even have to read again. Okay, let's see the Mishnah Berura Siv Katan Yud Gimel. Inyan bracha lefanei kachtina. What about making a bracha? Im adayin loy beirech bracha achroina. If the person who only got called up for 2 Aliya, 2 psukim, did not yet make Asher Naslanu Teras Emes Afa Pishikvar Galal HaSefer Torah, even though he already rolled the Sefer Torah, he had in mind to make the bracha. V'nizkaru shleikar rak shnei psukim. Then he remembered they only read 2 psukim. Chayzer v'karya b'loi bracha lefanea. He goes back and he reads without the bracha in front. Avalim kfar berach bracha achroina. If you already made a bracha achroina, nestalka kriya harishona legamri. The first kriya has already departed. L'chein tzarich lafsel v'arach lefanea. He would have to make another bracha before, and then go back to where the beginning of the previous reading was, because that last aliyah doesn't count. The reading of these 2 psukim is does not count. V'oid pasuk echad ima, and you read another pasuk kedei lahashlim shlosh psukim. V'mashnayim shalafanav loy karu rak shloisha. If the first 2 oilam each read only 3 psukim, then this Aliya, you really need to read 4 Pesukim. Tzarchu lahashlam ad arba Pesukim. You have to read 4 Pesukim. Kedei shiyah b'tzeira fa'asara Pesukim, so that you have a total of 10. Va'afilu kvar karu le'echad ha'oila acharav va'ala la teva. What if the Aliya that was called up and only read 2 Pesukim, not only did it make a bracha la'acharav, but you already called up someone after him, and he was oila lateva. He said, "Ya Amoid Beryl ben Shmerel," and now Beryl ben Shmerel is sitting there, but the problem is the last oila, his Aliya didn't count. So we say Yamoid Sham Oisa Achar Ad Shevarach Zeh Shenis, that Beryl ben Shmerel is going to wait there until the person whose Aliya was cut short makes another bracha. What if Beryl ben Shmerel already started saying a bracha? And now we realize the oila before him only read 2 psukim. V'im kvar hischal hasheni levarech, oisha siyem kol habracha v'nizkaru. If the next guy already started making the bracha, or he finished the bracha and then they remembered, yeshlei lahaschal mimakam shehischal zeh shalafanav, then you should go back to the place where the person in front of you began, meaning to that last aliyah that was no good. Dahainu af shnei psukim hakoidmim, those 2 earlier psukim, v'yisayim oid pasuk, v'yivarech la'achreah. But v'yeshaimim, there's a yeshaimim. No, it's not enough to read those 2 psukim and 1 more pasuk. Some say you need to read those 2 psukim and 3 psukim and 3 more psukim. V'yesham do shemalvad shnei psukim hakoidmin from the last aliyah that didn't count. You can't just add 1; you always have to add 3. Yikra oid shlosh psukim. This is the Shari Ephraim, the Shar Tzion brings, because he was not mechavein in his bracha on the 2 psukim harishonim, and therefore it's not oila loy lecheshbain. Not sure I understand that. Who was not mechavein? This new oila? Oh, what the case is that you called up Beryl ben Shmerel. I understand. You called up Beryl ben Shmerel, and after Beryl ben Shmerel already began his bracha, they remembered that the previous aliyah was only 2 psukim. Now, when Beryl ben Shmerel made a bracha, he was not mechavein that his bracha should go on those 2 psukim. So his berchas haTorah is then only going on 1 pasuk, but that's not valid. You have to read a minimum of 3. So even though you're reading 2 plus 1, but the kavana of the bracha wasn't going back on those 2. So you need to read an additional 3. That's the meaning of Shar Tzion Sivkatan Yud Zayin. Now, what about the guy who his aliyah was ineffective? The Harishon Yamoid Shamad Sheigmar Zeh. The first guy, he stands there until Beryl ben Shmuel finishes. V'achar kach yivarich Harishon shekar shnei psukim. Then the first guy makes another bracha. This guy, namely, who they previously only read 2 psukim. V'yikra lalan mimagam sher siyam zeh. And you'll give him an aliyah from where Beryl ben Shmuel finished off. If the first guy is already back in his seat, then you could call up somebody else to mashlim the 3 aliyos. When is it speaking? There was no kohen in the shul, and all the oilam were Yisraelim, and 1 Yisrael you called up for 2 psukim. Avlam kara zeh b'koyen shekar rak shnei psukim. What if the one that only read 2 psukim was a kohen? V'achar kach berach halevi v'oz nizkar shata kohen v'lo yikar rak shnei psukim. So the kohen read 2 psukim, and then the Levi made a bracha, and then they remember that the kohen only read 2 psukim. The Levi should not begin only from where the Kohen stopped, meaning after those two Pesukim. He should not go back. V'yikra mikanu alon shlosh Pesukim. V'lo yikra shnei Pesukim harishonim shekara Kohen. But now you're lacking the first two Pesukim because that original Kriya was not valid. There's no halacha you have to read from the beginning of the Parsha on a Tuesday, on a Monday or Thursday. Now, why not? Why don't we read those original two Pesukim? That Kriya was not a valid Kriya. The answer is because now it's going to be a pagam for the Kohen. The yia pagam la kohanim hanimtzam sham kishayikra halevi meirosh hasefer. It's going to be a pagam for all those kohanim standing around. If you call up the Levi from the beginning of the Parsha, v'achar halevi yikra shnei Yisraelim, and after Levi now, so the Levi is going to read from Pasuk Gimel and on. Those first two Pesukim will never really count. Then after the Levi, you're going to call up two Yisraelim because you have to have a minimum of three people being called up. The Achar Levi Yikra Shnei Yisraelim Lahashtam Minyan Akrum. The Yevshel Likroi Kohen Arishan Shata Achar Levi. You can't call up the Kohen who you made a mistake by after the Levi. The Ein Kohen Koyer Achar Levi. A Kohen doesn't go after the Levi. Ki Hakriya Shakor Shnei Pesukim Command Lesadamia. The reason why you need to call up two more Yisraelim is the original Aliya of two Pesukim doesn't count. V'im'ira b'Shabbos u'v'yamtiv shachris. What if it happened on Shabbos or Yamtiv in the morning? Shekari la'echad me'olam shnei Pesukim u'beirach la'achreha v'nizkar shata. If it happened on Shabbos and Yamtiv, so we said that you're going to call up the same guy who read those two Pesukim. What if you already made a bracha achreha? Yesh oimrim, there is an opinion, that's the Magen Avram and others. Then when we need to make up that Aliyah, we're not going to call you up. When we need to make up those Pesukim, we're not going to call you, the guy who originally we only read two Pesukim for. Ela yikra acher. We're going to call someone else. Why? During the week, you're now to add Aliyos. So if you're going to call up someone else, it looks like you called up four people, even though really you didn't, because maybe one of them was no good, but it looks like you called up four. The bechol she'asar lo'isa minyan akram, during the week where it's asar to add to the number of people called up. Im keinim yikru acher lahashtam b'mekaymai. If you call up someone else to make up for that aliyah that you only read two Pesukim mechsi k'mashikar ba'akrum, it looks like you called up four people. Ma she'en kein b'Shabbos, the mutar lahisif on Shabbos, you're allowed to add. Yoiser tov sheyikra acher. It's better to call someone else. Mishayikra oila zeh shnei pam b'sefer Torah achas, than to call up two people in one sefer Torah. Dei nachan lecharchila, which is not correct. Lecharchila kamavar b'siman reish pei beis. V'yaschal mimakam shischal rishon. You're going to go back to where the first one began, meaning to where. If at any point you only read two Pesukim, you have to go back to the beginning of those two Pesukim. V'chanal. V'yashlimu shiva krua milvad zeh shekar shnei Pesukim. And you're going to be mashlim 7 oilim besides the oila who is called up for two Pesukim. V'yesharmim da'af b'Shabbos ein tzarich likro la'acher. Some say even on Shabbos, where you could be moisif, don't call up someone else. This guy is being oila shnei pamim b'sefer Torah achas. It's okay because his first aliyah did not count. Okay, that is Sivkatan Yud Gimel. We'll Be'ez Hashem pick it up in Sivkatan Yud Daled tomorrow. Shkoyach.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.